John Kuzmich here with Jody Espina out of Savannah, Georgia, who is a world-renowned artist, jazz artist, mouthpiece maker, clinician, you name it, we got him. And I'm really excited to share his PowerPoint presentation about why mouthpieces are not necessarily all equal. So, Jody, tell us more.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. What's the big deal in mouthpieces? Why does it make a difference? And we're just trying to talk about getting the right equipment for the right job. And John, just wanted to say thank you very much to you and to banddirector.com for the service you're providing and for allowing me this platform.
Well, without question, the viewers are going to be they're going to be entertained because you have a lot of content and I am excited to share it with you. So we're going to go right to the PowerPoint and we're going to have fun.
Okay, let's do it. So, yeah, that's where we started in New York City in 2000. And we can go to the next slide. In 2008, we moved to Savannah, Georgia. We make every single mouthpiece right here. We're in over 45 countries. We have over 300 dealers. So we're, I would say, a successful mouthpiece company.
Well, I'll say more than that. You are extraordinaire because you provide customized mouthpieces that are tested repeatedly at all levels of production. And in today's modern world, that isn't the way mouthpieces are all produced. So we'll go on to the next slide.
All right. Well, I just want to give you a short background of the company, and then we get into mouthpieces and what makes a difference. Why is it important? How it affects the sound and your playing. We'll talk about our mouthpiece range, and we've included some demo videos that I made for each model. And then I want to show you how we make the mouthpieces. So we're going to go inside the factory, and it's a combination of high-tech machinery and great craftsmanship handwork. The DV is one of our models, and it's remarkable because of the design that went into it and how I got the patent. Also, we make, I think, some of the best play-along and instructional DVDs concerning jazz improvisation. So we'll finish with that. And well, you can go to the next. Go ahead, John.
That's quite a curriculum when you look at what we're going to cover. So here we go, and I see a picture of a budding artist.
Everybody laughs at this picture. I started when I was 12 playing, and by the time here I was 15, I knew I wanted to be a player. I wanted to go to Berklee College of Music in Boston and then go to New York and become a jazz musician. And basically that's what I did. This picture is remarkable because of that red mouthpiece there. And I'll tell you why that's remarkable in a second. So the next slide, we go to New York City. And in New York, I did every kind of music job you can imagine, including subbing on Broadway, playing in salsa bands, playing on movies and TV soundtracks. I was the director of a jazz department in a private music school. And I was a working musician, not really thinking much about mouthpieces. But in the next slide, I meet Santi Runyon, who was a famous mouthpiece maker. Now, it's coincidental that that red mouthpiece 2 slides back, he made that. So when I was a kid, I knew all about Santi Runyon because he was my teacher's teacher. And I met him around 2000. And the short story is that he customized one of his mouthpieces for me, and I loved it so much that he said, well, okay, Jody, we can make that for you and call it Jody Jazz. And that was amazing to me. I just thought I'd sell a few to my students, but I was so fascinated with how he customized it with sandpaper and file and transformed it into something I absolutely loved that I wanted to learn that. So I went 7 times a year down from New York City down to Lafayette, Louisiana, and his factory was in Opelousas, Louisiana. I'd work all day in the factory for a week at a time and then hang out in his studio behind his house in the evening. And I learned from his crew. I learned from him. And eventually I started designing my own pieces, and the company has grown from there. It was an amazing gift. Santi Runyon was one of the most amazing individuals I've ever met. So in the next slide, I did a TEDx talk, and if you just Google my name and with TED Talk, it'll come up. It really tells more of the story and what I was doing before I met Santi to kind of get me in this zone where I was following positive energy, and I had enough confidence in myself and my creativity to just do anything that came up. And that's how I built the company. So next slide, John.
Clarinet?
No.
Oboe?
No.
Saxophone?
No. Wait a minute. What was that last one again?
Saxophone.
Lisa, stop playing that stupid saxophone. Yes, that's it.
Alto or tenor?
A lot of people don't know about mouthpieces, and even great saxophone players don't know much about what makes a mouthpiece different. This ad says all mouthpieces are not created equal, and even band directors don't understand the difference between jazz mouthpieces and classical mouthpieces. So I made this ad showing that if the jazz band sax section have their classical mouthpieces, which might be a Selmer C-Star, a Van Doren AL3, maybe a Yamaha 4C, all good mouthpieces, but made to blend with flutes and clarinets. The mouthpieces have a large chamber inside, which keeps them soft. They have small tip openings, which make them kind of relatively easy to play, especially when you begin. But again, it's designed to keep the saxophone blending in concert band. And then the first day that the sax players get into the jazz band and the band director says, hey, saxophones, give me more volume. Well, they might as well be playing a shoe. And that's the point of the ad. You can go to the next slide. Here's a close-up. We had a lot of fun with this ad, and I told that kid, don't put that shoe in your mouth. It's my little son's dirty shoe. But it's just showing, like, you don't show up to the track in with dress shoes and try and run a race. You want to have the right shoes. So we want to have the right mouthpiece for a jazz band, and I'll tell you what's the difference. And you can go to the next slide. So there are many parts to a mouthpiece. We don't have to know them all. But for me, after prototyping so many mouthpieces, I realized that the most important part of the mouthpiece is the facing curve. And you can see that on the bottom mouthpiece. It's how the mouthpiece curves away from the reed. And people don't realize that there can be so many variations. And these variations happen in a space of less than 1 inch. So any deviation from a curve, from a schedule, it makes the mouthpiece play different. We have about 7 different curves on our different models. A curve can start close to the tip. That's called a short facing curve. It can start further away from the tip, medium or long facing. It can start and be almost straight and then curve more rapidly. Or vice versa. It's all kind of different curves. And what I do when I'm working with a curve, I'm looking to optimize the properties of that particular mouthpiece. For example, our jet mouthpiece is a bright mouthpiece with great altissimo, and that altissimo is helped with a short facing curve. The second most important part is the tip rail. the tip rail and the baffle right behind the tip rail. That's where the air enters. And just a little material anywhere that's left or too much taken away changes how the mouthpiece plays. So we've decided that in what we want is the best playing mouthpiece. We want a free-blowing mouthpiece. And once we get what we like, we want to be able to repeat that every time. So we let our state-of-the-art CNC machines cut our facing curve. And then we smooth it over by hand, but we're just smoothing it out. And when we get to the baffle and tip rail, we do that by hand because we can't, I haven't found a machine-made mouthpiece that's only made by machine that can play as well as what we do with hand. But we're not making that from scratch, that surface. We have kind of a guide, and then we're taking out the material and we're making the shape that we need. So those are the main parts. Every part of the mouthpiece makes a difference. But those are the two most important. The next one is obviously the shape of the chamber, the shape of the baffle. The bigger inside the mouthpiece, the more space, the darker and warmer the mouthpiece sounds. So Adolph Sax's original design was a very large chamber mouthpiece, and it was a classical sound. It was meant to sound almost like a violin, believe it or not. And jazz players in the United States around the 20s, 30s started to want more volume. And they found that if they put something inside their mouthpiece to make the space smaller, they could get more, more volume, more sound. So we can make all kinds of shapes inside the mouthpiece to shape the sound. And generally, basically, the smaller the chamber, the louder, brighter the mouthpiece. So we can go to the next slide.
Well, Wes, well said about the inner structure of the mouthpiece. That was very impressive.
Any questions anytime, John, just come on over. HR Star is our biggest seller. HR stands for hard rubber. Hard rubber is the most traditional material, one of the most favored materials for woodwind mouthpieces. And the reason is the hardness of the material. The original mouthpiece was wood, and that's a very warm sounding material. It's not as hard as some other things. So hard rubber has got more properties of the hardness of wood than, let's say, metal or some plastics or polycarbonates. So that's why we favor hard rubber, because it's not as hard. If it gets too rubbery, then the sound can get mushy. It's got to have a certain hardness. Everything about a mouthpiece is vibration and aerodynamics. So there's a certain vibration that we need. If the mouthpiece, the material is too, like I say, gummy, it's not going to vibrate right. All right, so that's a lot about material. We have on our website fact sheets. If you go to any page of a mouthpiece, there should be a button there that says a fact sheet. And it'll tell you the features, comparable players, the music styles that you want to play, and it'll give you the most popular tip openings. So I highly recommend those to people as you look through our website. We've tried to make the website as informative as possible. When I got into this business in 2000, I studied other companies' websites, and I felt that they weren't educating enough. And now I feel a lot of companies are doing quite a bit better job at it. But that was our original intent, really to give people as much information as possible. So if you go to the next slide, you can have a little demonstration of this mouthpiece. Hi, I'm Jody Espina, president and founder of Jody Jazz. Today I'm talking about the HR Star Alto mouthpiece. This is a hard rubber, round chamber jazz mouthpiece that's so versatile you can play it in many styles. If you're going for a jazz mouthpiece, this is the first one to look at, I think. You can play this in jazz. You can even use this in concert band. You can play it on a funk gig. So that's a lot of versatility from one mouthpiece. This is my first recommendation to anybody looking to go to a jazz mouthpiece. HR Star, 5M, 6M, 7M. 6 is our most popular tip. Every Jody Jazz mouthpiece is manufactured right here in our factory in Savannah, Georgia, and hand-worked to perfection. You can appreciate when you see it what love has gone into this mouthpiece. Also, every single mouthpiece is play tested against a benchmark, which is the best one we ever made. And every mouthpiece comes with a Rico H ligature, cap, and mouthpiece pouch. This is the Jody Jazz HR Star Alto mouthpiece.
No question. That's an excellent introduction of your different mouthpiece lines for cross-referencing all styles of playing, including classical. Well done, Jody.
Thanks a lot. Can you go to the webcam for a second?
There you are.
All right. I just want to talk to everybody about this, that there are so many different models. It's very confusing. And the videos offer an example. And but basically all this is about is this, when John says customization, what we're doing is these different models to appeal to a different body type almost. So in other words, when we go to the hard rubber, it has a round chamber inside when you look from the shank of the mouthpiece. Now, when you blow into that mouthpiece, that round chamber influences the sound, but you have a chamber in your mouth that people don't think about that. And you have your particular tongue and your soft palate. And when I remember that picture that we had with the lemon and the shoe and everything, my deal with that sax section was I gave them all a free mouthpiece, either an HR Star or our Jet, which have two very different chambers. And I gave the band director a whole set. But when I sat down with that sax section and found out what mouthpiece each person liked the best, it went 50-50, meaning half liked hard rubber, the HR Star, and half liked the Jet. Now the Jet has a much smaller chamber, and it's like a horseshoe shape where it's curved with a flat. And it's not that one mouthpiece was better than the other. It's that one mouthpiece sounded better for one person. So you can kind of go by these videos as a sound guide, but really the best thing is when you can try them. That's the most important thing in musical instruments, any equipment, is the more you can try, the better. So hopefully you can find a local music store where you can try things. Trade shows are a great way to go and try many instruments and many mouthpieces and stuff. If your state has what are they, TMEA, for example, is Texas Music Educators. And if your state has one of those and you can get to it, go for it. The best thing is trying for yourself, okay? So we can go to the next slide and talk about the Jet. Are we on the Jet now?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, as I said, the Jet is a smaller chamber. It was made to have more power, more bright. But whenever I make a mouthpiece, I still really must have a certain amount of fullness and bottom in the sound. So it's a really great mouthpiece, I think. And like I say, a lot of times when I go into a band and fit the sax section with these mouthpieces, it goes half and half, HR Star and the Jet. So if you want to go to the demo slide. All right.
I kind of flubbed it up. I didn't get you a chance to talk about that mouthpiece as much as you wanted. Did you want to say more?
I don't remember. I don't know where you left off, but basically the properties of the Jet compared to the HR Star are it's brighter, it's louder, it has tremendous altissimo, and all that might be good for some people, and other people might need a darker, warmer sound. Like I said, the HR Star is our biggest seller. It's the most all around. If you're coming to your first jazz mouthpiece, and that would be my first recommendation. Let me talk about tip openings. Do you want to go to the webcam again, John? So tip opening is the distance between the reed and the mouthpiece. All right. Now, when in these fact charts that we have, we show the most popular tip opening. A bigger tip opening means that the mouthpiece curves away further from the reed. The reed has to travel further in its vibration. You have to use more energy to make that happen, meaning more air and more muscle here in your embouchure. So if you're coming to your first mouthpiece, jazz mouthpiece, you're probably coming from a mouthpiece tip opening that's, in relation to mine, about a 4. And our jazz mouthpieces mostly start in a 5, and they go higher, bigger. The most popular would be about a 6 in an alto. If you only play 2 or 3 hours a week, you want to stay on the lower tip opening when you go to your first jazz mouthpiece. Let's say alto on a 5 and tenor on about a 6 star. Now, if you play 8 hours a week, 6 to 8 hours, or maybe 5 to 8 hours, you can probably play our most popular tip opening. If you play more than 8 hours, you might be able to play bigger. The only reason you would go bigger tip opening is because when you blow the other mouthpiece, it feels like it's shutting down on you, and you need a bigger tip opening. Professional players who play 20 hours a week often play the most popular tip. Students often think, John, that as each year they go and they get better, they should go to a harder reed. I go to the high schools and I see the kids playing a 4.5. Well, because I used to play a 3 and then I played 3.5. Now I play 4. Now I'm playing 4.5. Don't fall into that trap. Harder reed is not necessarily better. The best sound is the best reed. The best sound, that's the best reed. Okay? So harder is not better. Bigger tip opening is not better. The right tip opening for you. You're going to get your sound. Find the tip opening. If you get to play several tip openings, the one that feels the best to you is the one to get. Okay? One last thing, John, and I'll say it again later. When you move to a jazz mouthpiece, you need to use a softer reed because we're going to a bigger tip opening and the reed has to travel further. Softer reed. Also in jazz, we usually want a wetter, buzzier sound than classical, and the softer reed produces that. So if you use a Blue Box Van Doren 3 on your classical setup, you want to use maybe a 2.5 jazz reed. Let's say Green Box Java or Diodario Select Jazz, too hard maybe, something like that. Okay? So I think now we're going back to the slide and we're looking at the Superjet.
Correct, but I want to reaffirm two things you just summarized.
Sure.
Harder reed is not necessarily better, and everybody
Correct.
thinks jazz mouthpiece is going to be a bigger mouthpiece. And when the reed size gets harder, that bigger mouthpiece becomes a physical, laborious production thing, and you hit it on the nail or hit it on the head. How does it sound? And a lot of people have smartphones, and I'd say record yourself and listen objectively through the phone rather than just how it feels. It's got to feel good, but it's got to play well. So, no argument. You summarized it perfectly. Now we're going to go back to the jet mouthpiece, the super jet now. Uh,
Great. And I agree with you, John. It's sound and feel. Everything about what I do in making mouthpieces is sound and feel. How does it play for you? How does it feel? And then how does it sound? They're hand in hand, just like the mouthpiece and the reed are hand in hand. So Superjet is our newest mouthpiece. It's our brightest, loudest. It's like our Lamborghini. It's so much horsepower. And that's a lot of fun to be able to just cruise right past everybody in volume. Again, I didn't want it to be too shrill, so it still has this fullness. The Altissimo is crazy on it. It's a little brighter than the Superjet. It's a little louder. And there's a demo coming right up.
Okay, we'll go to the
Go
demo.
ahead. Yep.
Hi, I'm Jody Espina, president and founder of Jody Jazz, and I'd like to tell you about the new Jody Jazz Superjet alto mouthpiece. This is a silver-plated brass mouthpiece with a small chamber. It makes it our brightest mouthpiece yet. It's for smooth jazz players, rock, Latin players, funk, anybody who wants to get out there and get in front of the band, get soar over the top. Like I said, it's our brightest mouthpiece yet, but something always important to me is that the mouthpiece has to just play all around. It has to get plenty of bottom. And it has to be able to play soft and pretty. That's asking a lot in a mouthpiece that can really scream. Also, it's got to be very free blowing, and this has got it, like all our mouthpieces. I struggled with this mouthpiece to get this free blowing in the bottom while having all this brightness, and we got it. Also, it has a shorter facing than most mouthpieces, which helps this altissimo. All right. So, like all our mouthpieces, this comes with the Rico H ligature, a mouthpiece pouch, and a cap, and that's the Jody Jazz Superjet.
All right, let's move on to the Giant. So the Giant is a really interesting mouthpiece because it's metal in the shape of hard rubber. And I got the idea from two sources. Pharoah Sanders, the great saxophone player who used to play with John Coltrane, let me play a mouthpiece that John Coltrane had given Pharoah. And this mouthpiece was made out of aluminum. And it had a beautiful sound, so it got me thinking. And then with my association with George Garzone, and he's been playing our HR Star for many, many years, and I wanted to make a mouthpiece with this combination of this metal aluminum thing that I had heard in that Pharoah mouthpiece, and then George Garzone's influence. He started playing our mouthpiece years ago, and I had looked at one of his old hard rubber links, and I studied the facing curve of it. And so the inspiration for the facing curve for this is from that mouthpiece. What we did with the aluminum, we hard anodized it. And hard anodizing is a kind of a plating process, so it makes the aluminum safe to put in your mouth. They make cooking pots out of that. But hard anodizing makes the material as hard next to diamonds. It's almost as hard as diamonds. So we have a big chamber in it, which is a warm sound, and the hard material makes it a little brighter and gives it more projection. So it's a very unique mouthpiece. We call it stealth metal because when kids go into their college lesson, if they have a gold mouthpiece, many professors say, get that mouthpiece out of here. They want a hard rubber mouthpiece. And this one, they never have objections to. So you can go to the video.
Hi, I'm Jody Espina, president and founder of Jody Jazz. This is the Jody Jazz Giant tenor mouthpiece. It's called the Giant because when we made it, the sound reminded me of Coltrane. My goal was to try and give you hard rubber shape, which opens your mouth and gives you a warmer sound. So we've got this hard rubber shape giving you warmth. We've got a big chamber in here giving you darkness, and we've got a bright material giving you projection. It's a very unique mouthpiece. Our mouthpieces are very free blowing, but this one I put a little resistance into so you can push against it. That gives you this ability to do this. You can really shape that tone and get some air in there. As a versatile mouthpiece with a big sound, here's kind of a more bright sound. I don't think anybody has a problem playing a funk gig with this or totally straight ahead. So I think you're going to love this mouthpiece. I urge you to try it.
Okay, now we're looking at your stock.
Yeah, and that we explained that I think in the first video. Can you go to the webcam, John?
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to explain why we're using these fancy videos in this production, because we had tried, I like to do things live, so we had tried me playing all these demos live with this video, but the sound quality just wasn't good enough. And it's the technology with the webcam and the PowerPoint and the process. So that's why we're using these videos. They come from our website, and they're on every single mouthpiece that we have on the website. You can find one of these videos. So I just wanted to explain that because I'd rather do it live, and but this serves the purpose. So
well, very musical. Now we're back.
You want to go to?
Yeah, now we're back at your hard rubber stock.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go on to the DV. And the DV really changed the fortunes of my company. I made it about, I don't know, 2005, I think. And I'm going to talk about it later, I think, in the slides. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. You can just go to the video, and we'll keep moving.
Hi, I'm Jody Espina, president and founder of Jody Jazz. This is the Jody Jazz DV tenor. This mouthpiece was a quest for me. The goal in the DV tenor was to make a mouthpiece powerful and bright like most of us need on a lot of live gigs, but with the warmth and huskiness of a beautiful tenor mouthpiece. And I couldn't figure out how to do it until I was reading the Da Vinci Code, and they talk about the golden mean proportions found throughout nature. So I tried those proportions on a mouthpiece, and it led me to do this secondary window, which immediately added the bottom to the tone. Here's an example of the bottom on this. And it can be warmer too. And you heard some of the rock and roll type of stuff. You've got horsepower here. You can play softly and be comfortable, but when you need to rise above the band, you can do it.
All right, let's barrel through to the next slide. So DV Chicago, a little darker than the DV. Go ahead and go right to the slide.
I'm Jody Espina, president and founder of Jody Jazz, and this is the Jody Jazz DV Chicago. This is the third in the DV series. And the DV series was inspired by the golden mean proportions that led me to do the secondary window. I wanted a mouthpiece with power and brightness, but with bottom. The DV Chicago is in the middle. The DV is the brightest one. The DV New York is the darkest one. And the DV Chicago sits in the middle, actually a little closer to the DV in brightness. you want to take a look at this chamber. It's a very unique chamber. We were making a rounded out chamber, and we had these grooves in it. This was on the way to the rounded out chamber, and the grooves play so great. What they do is they take your air and they won't let you overblow. So you're really going to like this mouthpiece as an all-around mouthpiece. It's got the huge bottom. It's got the power. So I really think it can do everything. It's also got some sweetness. So the DV Chicago is probably the most versatile in the DV series.
All right, we can move on to the DV New York. And I think I explained most of it in the slide, so go ahead.
I'm Jody Espina, president and founder of Jody Jazz, and this is the Jody Jazz DV New York tenor. This is the darkest in the DV series. The DV series was inspired by the golden mean proportions, which led me to put that secondary window in there, and that adds this Dexter Gordon huskiness. You get that dark tone, but with effortless playing because of how free-blowing the DV series is. You'll notice the very thin side rails and tip rail. This lets that reed vibrate very efficiently. In addition, the DV series has its own facing curve. The DV series is so free-blowing that you'll want to try possibly a half-step harder reed, even a whole step. Don't be afraid anytime you're trying new mouthpieces to experiment with reeds. So here's an example of that big, huge bottom. And you'd be surprised at how bright you can play this mouthpiece. You take your side lips and take them off of the side of the reeds. So you can still get plenty of power. It depends on you how much brightness you need. But I really think any great mouthpiece should be quite versatile. But this definitely is our darkest mouthpiece. And if you like that smooth, beautiful, lush sound, you're going to want to try the DV New York.
All right. So now, John, we're going into the factory and try and talk about how we make this stuff. I was thinking, John, someday we should try and get to do this live where we have people come ask questions while we're doing this. That would be cool. That would add a whole nother element.
Well, that's very possible. That's very possible. But in the meantime, let's get into the factory and see the magic, because when I say customized and you bid on that word and said we do a lot of hand adjustments, we just don't crank them out by the hour, but we spend time, we field test. So let's find out some of your magic.
Okay. Well, what I feel is that this combination of where we find what technology can do for us. And the most thing that technology can do for me is repeatability. I don't want you or the teacher to get a mouthpiece that they love and tell their student to go get one, and then the student brings it back and it's not the same. I want everybody to get the benchmark. When we play tests, we grab the best one we ever made, play it, and then we play the production models. They got to play great. They have to play like the benchmark. So technology can give us that repeatability, but there's certain things that technology can't do, and that's when we bring in this old world craftsmanship, handwork. And I just gave a factory tour this morning, and the people remarked that this is like kind of art, what we're doing with our hands. So that's what we're about, is this combination. So in the next slide, we show how many quality control points we have on a mouthpiece. And again, we can't rely on that only, so we're going to still play them like you said. But we can go to the next slide. When we design a mouthpiece, we're using 3D modeling, which is computer-assisted drawing. And we can adjust every little piece of the mouthpiece. And we do prototyping, we do one little adjustment at a time so we know what is affected, what it affects, what part of the sound or playing it affects. And usually we go through over 100 iterations of a prototype before we find what we need. It's always swinging for the fences is what I call it. I'm looking for a mouthpiece to be a home run, to become a great and loved mouthpieces for the ages. I know that's kind of grandiose, but that's what I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for a great mouthpiece. And I have to play them, and I play all of the mouthpieces on the gigs, and that's what I'm looking for. So next slide, we make everything from bar stock. That means we make our own blanks as opposed to a molded mouthpiece where there's one blank made and all the tip openings for that model are made from that blank, which requires actually more handwork. When you make a small tip opening and a big tip opening, you have to change the chamber inside to keep the same timbre. When you make big tip openings, they get darker. And when you make small tip openings, they get brighter. So we can adjust the inside of the mouthpiece with our programs, and we can have the same timbre for all the tip openings. We're using, I think I mentioned, we're using hard rubber, a polycarbonate, which is a little brighter than hard rubber. We're using that for the Jet. We're using aluminum for the Giant, hard anodized aluminum. We're using brass, and we 24 karat gold plate that, or we silver plate it, depending on the model. And now the next slide, we go into our CNC machines. This was our first mill. CNC means computer numerical controlled. So when we go out of the 3D drawing program, we go into a computer-assisted machining program. And it's not automatic. We have to do a lot of work to get the drawing into this program. And then that program generates G-code, which are the numbers and things that communicate to the machine to tell everything, what tool, where to cut, how fast to cut, every little thing. It's just like music, John. As you know, MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, has taken everything about music and put it into numbers. And that's what we do with this computer-assisted machining. So you can go to the next slide. This is how we start hand filing the baffle and the tip rail. You can go to the next slide. It's very difficult work. It takes over 6 months to start to learn this, and it takes years to become great at it. What we're looking for is such perfection. If you ever get to look at our mouthpieces, look at that tip, look at the symmetrical tip rail and how thin it is. The thinner it gets, the less room you have for error. And when you're filing, the dust that you're filing goes onto the tip rail, so you can't even see what you're trying to file. You can go to the next slide. This is, one of the places where you could ruin the mouthpiece. It's really hard. And again, when you look at our stuff, you should see this beautiful glass-like finish. We could make it so where it plays great but doesn't look good. But I believe looks are important, and it's part of what shows how much care we take into this and how much pride we take. I'm so proud of my crew and how good they are. Go to the next slide. So we measure, like we mentioned before, we measure in many ways. This particular slide is showing the facing curve, where it begins. That's a very thin, what we call a shim, and it's showing that the facing curve is straight. If the curve, one rail curves differently than the other, then it could be crooked. So Crooked mouthpieces, by the way, can play good, but we're looking for a straight curve. So that's what we're trying to get. A reed vibrates on two sides, and that's why I've played mouthpieces that measure a little funny and play okay. But our goal is very straight curve. So next mouthpiece, next slide. This shows that we play test every single mouthpiece. Very, very important. And I can only speak to our factory. I've been to other factories. We must play test every mouthpiece. Even though we've measured it, everything, all the specs are right, there are times when things don't play right. The tolerances are so fine that you can't measure everything, but I can feel everything when I play it. So we'll find something that doesn't play right. It's been a couple of times a whole tray of mouthpieces were not right, and they had to be rejected. I wanted to mention we do have a lot of rejects. And in our hard rubber mouthpiece, I have still quite a few rejects that I'll sell to sometimes repairmen if they want to work on their mouthpiece skills, or any hobbyist. We can sell them at kind of 10 at a time at a pretty good price. We take our name off, and you're starting with a very good mouthpiece, and then you can practice your mouthpiece refacing skills. So if anybody ever wants to call us up, we have quite a bit of that, because I don't sell every mouthpiece we make. It's got to play. Next slide.
I like your pride. It's called we are dealing with a product that works. And mass production is nice for financial success, but the reality is it's got to play, and you just nailed it right there.
Well, speaking of financial success, Duke Ellington sax section he had the same guys for 30 years. They asked him, how do you get those same guys? He said, I pay them money. Now, he subsidized his band, his big band, by his publishing money. He had hit songs like Take the A Train and all his hit songs, so he made money. So I would like to be charging for our HR Star and our Jet about $350, $395, but we're charging just under $200. And that is so that I can be in high schools and colleges. I'm making this super professional mouthpiece at that price, but I have the high-end mouthpieces that I'm charging the price I want to, and we kind of subsidize that lower end so that I can have this kind of business plan. So I know that's a long into the weeds story, but that's how I'm able to sell that mouthpiece for. I couldn't do it if that's all I had. I have to have the higher end products that can help me subsidize that product a little bit because of the attention that we're putting in it. So we can go into the DV on the next slide. And it's maybe just interesting to people because of how I came to this DV. I was looking for a mouthpiece that had power and fullness of sound. And you have to, for power, in what you need in a live situation, you need a certain volume and cut. And but you lose bottom when you do that. You make the chamber smaller. So I was reading the Da Vinci Code, the novel, and they talk about the golden mean proportions or the golden section. You can go to the next slide. Ancient Greeks knew about this proportion found throughout nature. And basically, you take the length of something and you divide by 1.618. Each compartment of the nautilus shell is smaller by that proportion. And when I divided a mouthpiece by that, it gave me this idea of the DV, which I'll show you in a second. Next slide. So all these things found in nature conform to these proportions. The human body, the dolphin, the nautilus shell. And when I read in the Da Vinci Code that the Stradivarius violin had these, it made me say, well, how can I use that in a mouthpiece? And the next slide, all the proportions in this mouthpiece conform to that. And it's what led me to make this secondary window. the opening under the reed, under the, not the normal part of the reed, but underneath it, where the bark is. And when I opened that up, that gave me this mid-bottom that gave the mouthpiece a fullness and sound. Really thin rails, really thin tip rail, a unique facing curve makes it the freest blowing mouthpiece I know of. And you can read the patent and see what it's about, but it's a very special mouthpiece. You can go to the next slide. This illustrates the deep chamber of the bottom mouthpiece, the DV New York, as opposed to the shallower chamber of the DV. Just based on what you're looking for, what style of music you play, which one you might like. We go to the next slide. These are this importance. We've been talking about reeds a little bit. Never underestimate the importance of reeds. The mouthpiece is the most important part of the sound. It's closest to you. It's more important to the sound and feel than the instrument is. The second most important is that reed. So don't underestimate the reed. If you're not liking your sound or feel, you should be looking at both of these things, mouthpiece and reed. If your sound is too airy or dry, play a softer reed. If it's too wet or buzzy, play a harder reed. You need a reed that's soft enough so you can get your low notes. You need a reed that's hard enough so your high notes don't sound weak. Okay? Soft enough so you can play your low notes, but hard enough so your high notes don't sound weak. Does that make sense?
More than sense, because we know that intonation is affected. We know that response of the player with the mouthpiece reed combination is affected. And tone quality. You know, what is tone quality? Well, it's subjective, but when you have a good combination of mouthpiece, reed, and ligature, and then adjustment on the mouthpiece, we're talking a very personal touch, but a very dynamic presentation.
Yes. And you just mentioned ligature. I wanted to show you one thing. Could you go to the webcam? All right. All our mouthpieces come with the Rico H ligature. It's a great ligature because it goes on the reed like this with the H part, and the way it touches the reed. It gives a good solid sound. I've tried it against many ligatures, and I really believe it's a great ligature. But I made this called the Power Ring, and it's hefty, heavier than any other ligature, and it slides down on the mouthpiece over the reed, just like this, and you just make it firm. So part of the heaviness is what's adding beef to the sound, kind of body, and then the way it touches the reed, it's concave inside, so it doesn't touch the reed all the way around. It's touching the reed on 4 points, and then it's just touching the top of the mouthpiece. It's a great upgrade, and the price is quite competitive. It's brass, 24 karat gold plated, or we have silver plated. I encourage people to give it a try. We have some models that fit other mouthpieces too. So it's ligature is a certain percentage of your sound and feel, and to some people it makes a lot of difference, and to others it makes less. But sometimes it's worth looking at, and I highly recommend this ligature as an upgrade to try. All right, we can go to the next slide. This is our publishing. We make DVDs and play-along CDs for jazz improvisation. In the Funk Zone with George Garzone is this 2 DVD set. It uses 1-key grooves and the minor pentatonic scale to teach improvisation from beginning to advanced. A lot of people have fear of improvising. And I go out to schools all the time and I try and get the whole band to improvise, and there's always people who don't want to do it. With this method, it takes that fear out of it. In the next slide, it's going to show myself and one of
Hi,
my
I'm Jody
endorsers,
Espina
and we show
from
how
Jody Jazz,
easy it is
and
to
I'm
do
here
it.
with my good friend and Jody Jazz artist, David Beecroft. Today, we're going to try and take the fear out of improvising by playing along with this DVD, In the Funk Zone with George Garzone. On the DVD, there are lessons and how to play over one-key grooves with the minor pentatonic scale. Now, this can be for somebody who's never improvised before because it starts at the very beginning. When we improvise, we're going to try and keep ourselves to those 5 notes of the minor pentatonic scale. And it's all explained in this DVD for you. Here we go.
All right. Well, I encourage everyone to go to the website and check out the trailer of that. Take a listen to this one. And go ahead, John, if you want to jump ahead so we can listen to the trading part. Did you get enough there?
Absolutely.
All right. You can go ahead and pause that. So just a little bit about those, our publishing. We don't have a lot, but what we have, I think, is the best in the business because we record at a great studio. We, in that one that you just heard, there's 9-foot Steinway that was played by Mulgrew Miller, the great pianist. That piano used to be in Carnegie Hall. And on the Funk Zone, the DVD, that was John Patitucci, Mike Stern, and Kenwood Denard. If you don't know who those guys are, check them out. They've played with Miles Davis, Jaco Pastorius, and everyone you can imagine. So we, again, swung for the fences when we did this publishing. We didn't use adequate players. We used the best players money could buy. And I'm really proud of those. I'm just as proud of those as our mouthpieces. We have a lot of great players. Jeff Coffin plays with the Dave Matthews Band. We have, in the next slide, George Garzone. Michael Brecker said about George Garzone, he said, "I'm not the master of saxophone, George Garzone is." And we have many great players as endorsers that play our mouthpieces, and that really is a special thing for me, having because I get to play with them sometimes too, and it's been a real thrill to do this. The next slide is just an ad that we put out. And I just wanted to tell people, because sometimes musicians are hesitant to invest in themselves. And what this ad says is that you've practiced a lot. You've invested in a good horn. Don't you deserve the best mouthpiece? So I just encourage people, no matter what brand it is, if you ever play a mouthpiece and you really love it, plays great, get it. Because it's not that often that people find a mouthpiece that they fall in love with. And I've seen people not get it, and then they regret it every time. So when you find the mouthpiece that you love, it's like finding your soulmate. And I know that because I've been able to create these mouthpieces that I absolutely love. And I don't know if you want to go to the webcam, John, so we can say goodbye properly.
Well, more than that, I think you've given a message for band directors, saxophonists, that there is an art of music that requires the mechanics, the horn, the ligature, the mouthpiece, the reed, and you have taken a lot of interest in balancing, and then you used your pi theory from the Greeks and you've put it together. It's got to sound good, it's got to feel good, it's got to be good. And then you go one extra measure that goes beyond the business scope. You price your student line mouthpieces at a price that can't be topped for the amount of customization and personal attention that goes into it. And which means you're not just selling something, you're producing something that is art. And when you put it all together, you are providing a service. Now, the one thing that is difficult when I send students to music stores is they don't have a lot of mouthpieces in stock to try.
Yeah.
And the reality is, those mouthpieces may not all be the perfect mouthpiece of that product line. And you have come up with 7 different product lines for customization of sound response. And then within each product line, you're doing a lot of handwork. Give me an idea of how many days, months, hours, seconds it takes to produce one mouthpiece. Are we talking about what period of time?
I know this is crazy, but I don't actually know that right off the top of my head. I know that's crazy, but each model is different, and we do what it takes, whatever it takes. And but you know, the most important part to remember about this, as you summarize it, music. The music is the most important thing. This equipment, it helps us play the music, and if it can help us forget about the mouthpiece or forget about the reed or whatever, so that we can just get to the music, that's the most important thing, because music is not politics, or it's just this other language that's beautiful, and then we can communicate with each other through. So I'm just a little part of the cog to help music happen. That's what I want. That's what I want for everybody, to play music.
Now, I want to know how people can contact your company, come up with some way that they can try your mouthpieces. Do they have to fly to Savannah, Georgia to be able to try your mouthpieces? What kind of a network do you offer potential clients?
Sure. We would like you to look on our website under locations, and that shows you the dealers nearest you. And then we would like you to call up those dealers and see what they have, go visit them, try what they have. If there's not a dealer near you, or you can't get the model that you need to try, we have a very great online retailers such as Woodwind and Brasswind that carries all our mouthpieces, and we also carry our mouthpieces. So we love to talk to you. If you have any questions, call us, and we have all the resources here. We can tell you where to go or what to try. At the last resort, we can send you mouthpieces directly, but we believe in really supporting all our dealers. We think it's very important to support your local music store because that's such a resource for you to try things live. And we also, like I said, Woodwind and Brassman is a great retailer where you can try many things, and we have it all. If you can make it to Savannah, Georgia, I guarantee you're going to have a great time. We're going to give you a presentation, take you on the factory tour, and we'll have a tray of mouthpieces put out just for you. So if you can make it here, please do. We have people all the time coming through. So.
Well, I want to thank you and make you aware that this will be broadcast. I can't tell you how many times, but I can tell you that the audience is between 1 to 2 million web page views every month. And then when they do the Macy's Day Parade, who knows how that spikes. Now, the final thing,
Okay.
they've got to get a hold of your CD, and that's on your website. And they need to order that because it is more than just demonstrations, it's lessons and opportunities for learning not only the minor pentatonic scale, but clear descriptions of what to try to get people to improvise creatively. So, do they just go to your website?
Sure. They can also order it on Amazon. They can order it from, I think it's jazzbooks.com, Jamie Abersold. They can order it from most of our retailers. Like they say, almost wherever music is sold. But that's In the Funk Zone with George Garzone. I recommend that for anybody who wants to improvise, beginner to advanced.
Well, all I can say is bravo.
Thank you so much,
Bravissimo.
John.
We have been
Thank you.
privileged to have an artist share his wares, and I'm going to go to the closing slide, which says,
Thank you. There we go.
so
All right.
thank you.
Okay.